My name is Joshua Maitland, and this is my midterm project for the home expense calculator. So I only use two header files, and then in my main function, I created a bunch of variables of different data types, but I only use three different data types. I use an int, a bool, and a double, and also a string also. So I guess it's more than three. So an int, a bool, a string. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And then the first variable I declare was the first month and the last month, so the user can determine the range. They can give me the first month of the range and the last month of the range of months. I have a boolean called valid, which is equal to false right now, and later down in the code I'll explain why it is false. And then I have a standard string for the first month name and the last month name to determine the name of the first month and the name of the last month. Then I have some doubles, so the user can input their mortgage or rent, home insurance, electricity, water, gas, internet, and so forth. Same thing for the budget, just different variable names. I have some doubles for running totals, so I can calculate the total of the gas, electricity, water, internet, groceries, restaurant, and everything else for the budget also. Then I have some booleans that determines for each expense if the user went over budget for that respective expense. So for example, if the user went over their mortgage budget, then true will be assigned to mortgage over. If they didn't go over their mortgage budget, then true will be assigned to mortgage under. And same for home insurance over, home insurance under, electricity over, electricity under. Some more running totals for the total expense. That is the total of everything, every expense throughout the range of months. Same for the budget, for the total budget, and a variable for the amount saved, so I can calculate it. Then I have a string for renovations to determine whether the user did do it, to determine if the user did reservations or not. That is used later down in the code. Then I have an array which has a size of 12 elements that holds each month of the year. Right here I have a while loop that if valid is equal to false, it will prompt the user to enter their first month. It will validate that first month. If it's negative, if it's less than or equal to 0, it will print error invalid input, and it will allow the user to try again to input a different number for first month. And the same thing is done for the last month. Then I have an if statement that basically makes sure that the user stays between the months of the year, so from 1 through 12. So the first month needs to be greater than or equal to 1, and less than or equal, and the first one needs to be less than or equal to 12, and the same thing for the last one. If this is true, then it will go into the switch statement, and it will assign the month, a month from the array to the first month name, which is a string. So if first month was 0, which the user cannot input, but in my for loop down in the code I have -1. So if the user enters 1, -1 will equal to 0, because the first element in an array is of position 0. Then the second element is the position of 2, so it has to be 0 in order for me to get January. So if the user entered 1, all I got to do is subtract 1 from it to get January, and then January will be assigned to first month name, if that's the case. Then I did the same thing for the last month. Yes, I did the same thing for the last month to determine which month, what is the name of the last month. Then now I asked the user to input some data. So the user is prompt to input how much they spent on mortgage or rent for the month. Then that data is validated. Then the same thing is done for the mortgage budget. Ask them to input the data, then it's validated. Then if the mortgage budget is greater than the mortgage, that means they were under their budget, which means mortgage under is true. Else if the mortgage is greater than the budget, that means they went over their budget, which means mortgage over is equal to true. And this will help me to create a list of all expenses that the user went over on. And the same thing is done for the home insurance budget, the total maintenance budget, and then for the total renovation, because not everybody is going to be doing renovations on their home. The program asked them if there were any renovations done on their house, and they should enter Y for yes. Now, if the user enter Y for yes, then we enter this if statement that allows them to do the same thing that they did for the total maintenance. They'll enter the amount spent and the total budget. Then it will determine if they went over the budget or under the budget. Else, if they did not do any renovations, then the program will just assign 0 to both the total renovation and the total renovation budget. Then now I have a for loop to determine. I have a for loop that goes through the range. So as you see here, I assigned first month to I, and the expression is if I is less than or equal to 1, then I should be incremented by 1. So if the user enter 1 for the first month and 2 for the last month, then this loop would only iterate twice. Then inside the loop, I ask the user for electricity, gas, water, internet, groceries, and restaurant expenses, because those expenses varies. So each month is going to be different. So this loop basically goes through every month within the specified range to determine their expense for that, to take in the data for their expense for that specific month and their budget for that specific month. And it determines whether they went over that budget or not. And then after all of that, at the end of it, since I only got the mortgage per month within this loop, I use the running total to add the mortgage each iteration. Since this loop is already going through the range of months, I didn't want to create multiple for loops, so I just did everything in this one for loop to save memory, I guess. And I did that for the mortgage total and the home insurance total, and for the mortgage budget and the home insurance budget. So for each month, it will add the mortgage to it because it's already going through the range of months. Then I set valid to true, so the loop run again. But if valid was false, or if the user entered in a number that wasn't between 1 or 12, or that is 1 through 12, then this will be printed out error numbers, or numbers inputted were invalid, and it was set valid to false, so the loop will run again and let them try to enter the first and last one again. That has valid input. Then at the end of the program, I have total expense. I have a calculation that calculates the total expense for all the expenses for the range. Same thing for the budget. And then I'm just printing out some data right here for the total expense incurred by the homeowner from the first month, say January to February, was total expense, and that is the sum of all expenses. And the same thing for the budget underneath. Then I have a bunch of if statements that go through each expense to determine whether they went over their budget or not. And then at the end, I determine I use the if statement to determine if they saved or if they went over their budget. And I'll print out how much they saved and how much they went over their budget by. Now let's run it with my sample there. So I'm gonna just go through from January to February. So that would be 1. The last one would be 2. Then for the mortgage, I say 5,000. I spent, my budget was 5,000. And for home insurance, it was 300. My budget was also 300. And for home maintenance, I spent 250, but my budget was 200. Did I do home renovations? Yes, I did. And I spent 3,000 on home renovations, but I wanted to spend 2,800. 2,800. Then in January for electricity, I spent let's see, because I have a sample input that I use. So I spent 80 on electricity and my budget was 100. For gas, I spent 60 on gas, but my budget was 60, so it's okay. Water, I spent 50 on water, my budget was 60. For internet, I spent 100, but my budget was 90. For groceries, I spent 250, but my budget was 200. And for the restaurant, I spent 150, but my budget was 100. And then it will do the same thing for February. And then so for February, I'm just follow my little chart that I created. I spent 80 on electricity in February, but my budget was 100. 70 on gas, so my budget was still 60. 50 on water, but my budget was 60. For internet, I met my budget. And then for groceries, I spent 205. My budget was 200. And for the restaurant, I spent 60. My budget was 100. And there inputted, I did go over my home maintenance budget and my home renovation budget. I did go over gas and internet, groceries, and it's told me that, and it printed out how much I went over my budget by.